Buongiorno e benvenuti, vi do il benvenuto a questa intervista che faremo con una figura poco conosciuta, quella di Ronald Wayne, il terzo fondatore di Apple. Apple si appresta il primo aprile a celebrare i suoi primi 50 anni, non pochi, e in quell'aprile di 50 anni fa, tra i fondatori di Apple, oltre a Steve Jobs e a Steve Wozniak, c'era anche Ronald Wayne. Ora Ronald Wayne è qui con noi, passerò all'inglese, gli darò il benvenuto e inizieremo questa intervista. Hello Mr. Wayne, nice to meet you.
Good morning, sir.
And thank you for your time and for your availability to interact with us and have this conversation together. I want to jump into your story, the reason why we are here. In April, Apple will reach its first 50 years from its foundation, and you were there. You were part of that adventure for 12 days. That's right. You left the company 12 days after the establishment of Apple Computer. I would like to understand why you left, and looking back to that days, what did those 12 days actually feel like in your experience after so much time?
Well, I was a participant in the founding of the Apple enterprise. I drew up the original contract myself personally and made 3 copies of it, and so that each of us would have the copies of the original contract. One of those contracts that I created at that time recently sold for $2.5 million at auction. The most valuable document I'd ever created. By the way, I drew no revenue from that. The origins, why did I leave, is the question you were asking.
Yeah, exactly. I would like to understand the reason why behind that decision.
Okay, well, it was really quite simple. It was a move of self-defense, because when we began this enterprise, 50 computers sold to the bite shop. And those 50 computers required $15,000 worth of components that had to be acquired. And they were acquired under credit. $15,000 at that time would be the equivalent of about $100,000 today, so you can see what that really amounted to in terms of buying power. What happened was that when this incident occurred, when this arrangement occurred to acquire that on credit, it became obvious to me in a partnership that we were equally and severally liable for the indebtedness. And the fact was that each of my 2 partners, Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak, not to put it too delicately, didn't have 2 nickels to rub together. I, on the other hand, had a house and a car and a bank account, so that in the event that this very new and somewhat shaky, shall we say, enterprise, if that had come apart and failed, the creditors for that $15,000 would have come after the guy with the most money, or the most payable to recover the debt. And that, of course, was me, which made me the 10% owner of the enterprise and 100% owner of the liability. And that didn't seem appropriate to me to take that kind of risk. And I became quite nervous about it and immediately had my name taken off the contract. That is how that particular event occurred.
But you draft the original partnership agreement and also designed the first logo of the Apple computer, and wrote also the manual of the Apple One, the first device that was designed by the company. Do you think that history has fairly credited you for the weight of that foundational work?
As a matter of fact, no, because much of my history in that has been fairly well erased in a variety of different ways. So, no, I have not been given credit. To clarify the a story that's been floating around for decades that I had sold my share of the enterprise for $800. It's completely inaccurate. When I had my name taken off the contract at the registrar's office, they suggested or implied that I had to have some sort of a number on there, and they recommended $800 just as an arbitrary number. I said, well, if that's what has to be done, then put $800 down there. And that's how the illusion began, in addition to which, months after I had separated myself from the enterprise, I received an envelope from Steve Jobs, no letter, no instructions, no explanation, and a check for $800. To be candid with you, I thought that that was simply a tip. And to be candid with you, a cheap tip at that, because during the time I was there doing the contract, doing the original logo and so on, I was never paid a penny for any of the work that I did. And so that's a rather jaded beginning of the enterprise.
I have also a question regarding what was the atmosphere that very days. How did the Silicon Valley, the incoming, let's say, starting Silicon Valley appears to your eyes and also to you when you started this venture with the two Steves?
To be candid, this was my first forte into computer technology, as far as the computers were concerned. My involvement in electronics, fundamental electronics, was in slot machines and a few other components of electronic design. I happened to just become a part of the enterprise and part of the industry. That was essentially it. I had worked for Atari before that, and had been their product development engineer and chief draftsman. And as it turned out, because the company was having problems monetarily, I found out what the cause of that problem was. They had no documentation system for purchased parts, and they were selling machines, Pong machines, as fast as they possibly could. They were employing hundreds of people to do this, and yet at the same time, they were on credit hold for components. It didn't make sense. As it turned out, the problem was that all of the profits were being chewed up by a totally ineffective purchase parts system, which made it extremely difficult for them to organize the fabrication of the products that they were producing. They were making them, but they weren't making money at it. But immediately after my documentation system was created, and here is the manual that I created.
Oh, wow.
Took me about 3 months to put this together. I had 20 years experience in documentation, and knew exactly what to do. This happened immediately after my employment into Atari in the first place.
And after that the days that the part of your life that you spent into Apple Computer, you have occasions to meet again the two Steves. I'd like to understand what did you talk with them? What was the exchange of the ideas that was?
You're speaking of the situation that occurred several years later.
Yeah, exactly. I would like to understand if there was a conversation.
Yeah. There was a meeting between Wozniak, Jobs, and myself at the Apple enterprise, at the offices of Apple. And it was a very casual meeting, and there was nothing of any consequence discussed about it. There were no serious discussions about literally anything. It was a casual reunion of the three of us. That's all that came out to be.
And what was the atmosphere? What was the interaction? It was good. There
Oh,
were
yeah, it was very pleasant, very amiable. There was no difficulties, and it was just a casual meeting, under the invitation of Jobs to come there. He had provided airfare and transportation and all sorts of things to get me there, and hotel space when I got there, and so on. It was very gracious of him, and that's it. He and Woz and I sat around a table at the Apple Enterprise, the Apple facility, and just chatted about, shall we say, old times and so on. But nothing of significance was really discussed.
did he ever try to get you back into Apple business or not?
Uh, Actually, after I left, years later, Jobs actually did, on two separate occasions, offer me a position at Apple, and I declined on both occasions because I knew that my forte was not at the level of technology that Apple was functioning at, and that were I to be employed there, I'd wind up in the documentation department. I would be spending probably the next 20 years of my life shuffling papers, and that was not the life I envisioned for myself. So I declined on both occasions.
One of the, let's say, foundational aspiration of Apple, when it started its business, is to democratize the use of technologies and a personal computer. 50 years later, would you say that this promise was kept, or did something go wrong, let's say, along the way?
No, I would say that obviously, having become one of the largest corporations literally in the history of the world, I would say they very much achieved what they had initially set out to do. It took time. There were ups and downs, but they eventually did things productively and creatively, and it's been a benefit to countless people around the world.
Obviously, we are here today again because of this moment in your life in which you were involved with Apple. But again, you mentioned before your first companies, then your career with Atari. So there were many experiences in your curriculum vitae. So I'd like to ask you, what is the project, the experience, the work that makes you more proud of?
I have had many wonderful experiences in my life. I first of all, as a technologist, an engineer, I had spent a dozen years in the world of what are called job shops. That is to say, rather than working for companies directly, I was working for a job shop enterprise that would rent me out to companies for a limited time. A limited time could be months, or on one occasion, 2 years at Lawrence Livermore Laboratories, because I happened to have been a compulsive model builder, and I had been the creator of the first electronic slot machine, fully electronic slot machine, ever to be qualified by the Nevada State Gaming Control Board. And I was so active in that eventually I formed a company before I realized that I actually had no business being in business. And the company failed literally because I was not skilled at business. And it was a rather unsuccessful enterprise, and it knocked me down a bit. And I had to recover from that loss, and psychologically. And to do that, what I actually did was to take on a project of building Jules Verne's Nautilus. This model of Jules Verne's Nautilus is pictured in Disney's
submarine from the novel.
Right. This model was 7 feet long, detailed inside and outside with lighting and all of the details of interior and all the rest. And it took me a year and a half to put this together. And about 2/3 of the way through the project, I began to, while it was serving its purpose, I had a delightful time. I'm, as I said, a compulsive model builder, and I build things for the fun of doing it, just as I had done most things in my life, literally for the fun of doing it. But I began to wonder about 2/3 of the way through the project what I was going to do with this thing when it was finished. And I finally decided I would donate it to the Maritime Museum in San Francisco. And they were gracious enough to accept it. That was 50 years ago. And about a week ago, this is one of the detailed models. This is a detailed submodel of an interior. And only days ago, I visited the storage of the facility in San Francisco, and they had maintained it, the model, and protected it carefully for 50 years. They're expanding their facilities now, and they're going to be putting the model into a more prized position than it had appeared before. But it was my pleasure and I think one of my greatest achievements, at least as a model builder. As I said, most of the things that I'd done in my lifetime were done for the pure fun of doing it. I learned basic economics and basic electronics because I had a fascination with each of these at various times. And when I became fascinated with something, I delved into it with both feet and just enjoyed myself thoroughly. As a matter of fact, my interest in electronics began with my interest in electricity when I was a kid. After World War II, suddenly surplus stores jumped up all over the place, including surplus stores in electronics. And suddenly I could buy electronic components dirt cheap. And it was my opportunity. I was about 13 or 14 years old. And I could buy these parts cheap. And I wrote into the government printing office for a basic course in electronics, a Navy training course. It was a very expensive book. I think it was $2.50. But with that, I taught myself basic electronics in the age of vacuum tubes. I was graduated from the School of Industrial Arts in New York City in 1953. That was my high school diploma. And I never had the resources to get a college education, but I taught myself basic electronics in the age of vacuum tubes. And when transistors came in, I did the same thing. Integrated circuits after that. I taught myself integrated circuit logic and ran my entire career on self-instruction. And this was aided by the fact that I used to work job shop, as I indicated, and that took me to different places for different positions in different facets of the electronics and product development industry. And so I suddenly found myself actually what was called a polymath, a person who was skilled in all the facets of basic electronics. That is to say, electronics, drafting, illustration, design. I even became a machinist. And when I was out, when I extended myself into formal employment, I was a perfect candidate for any small company because all of the different jobs that I was capable of doing professionally, so that when a small company hired me, there were 3 or 4 people they didn't have to hire because I could do their jobs as well. My career originally concluded when I retired in 1995.
Okay.
After 16 years as chief engineer at Thor Electronics. And I had spent 16 years there, and what this was an accumulation of all the skills I had acquired over the preceding decades. I have reached beyond the age when I am employed by anyone to do a professional job, but I have all the skills, and I still proceed with many of these skills, just again for the pure fun of doing it.
My last question regards, let's say, a message for the future. If you were advising a young engineer today that would like to start something like, let's say, the next Apple or fantastic startups that can disrupt the world, what would you tell them? And what would be, let's say, also different from what you told yourself 50 years ago?
Well, many youngsters have come to me over the years and said, what should they do for a profession? And my answer has always been the same. Find a profession that you enjoy so much that you'd be willing to do it for nothing. And you'll never work a day in your life. You'll be having too much fun. And I still hold to that philosophy.
I have, let's say, again, a final curiosity. Do you still use in your daily routine some Apple devices, an iPhone or a computer or a MacBook or something else, or not?
I have to confess that, yes, I do have an Apple product that I've been using for years, but technology of this kind has never really interested me greatly. I have been, as I said, interested in so many different things that whatever it happens to be at the moment, that's the course I follow. Among other things, I had developed the first advancement in meter technology that had occurred. This type of a meter, pointer type meter, was invented by a man named D'Arsonval in the 1880s. And it is still in use today as a general metering instrument. However, it has a problem. And the problem is that the pointer is on a shaft and the shaft is on a bearing. And every bearing, no matter how finely you try to make it, always has friction. And that friction is such that
it's impacting the measurement.
As the voltage goes up, the pointer follows, and it stops, and the voltage drops, and the pointer never really points at the actual reading. So back in 1971, I got a patent on the first improvement in DC meters in more than 100 years. And I'm now working with a friend of mine on expanding that technology to something far greater into the AC world, and to produce a meter which is far more useful in today's world.
Well, so we still have, let's say, a topic or a reason why to meet again and understand how this application of technology could go so far. But thank you for sharing with us all these memories, all these stories for your past experience and for your career. Thank you very much, Mr. Wayne.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to give you a background on what has happened over the years.